Hey guys, Paul here from Meldrum Performance Coaching. Hope you're all having a pretty good Monday. Well, I'm recording it on the Monday where I am. Had my first MPC seminar on the weekend. So not the first seminar I've ever given, but the first only MPC seminar that have had very, very long time. So I had a bunch of students come over to my house to go over it. We've got the space for it. We've got like a nice little gym that we can take people through the practical side of the course. And the course basically covered all topics that I talked about last week. So what I want to share today in this podcast is some of the feedback well, not some of the feedbacks, but more of the takeaways of what people learned in the course. So, and how these can actually immediately go into your programming. So the first one is I introduced this concept in biomechanics that basically everything is boiled down to inhalation and exhalation. That's kind of like the fundamental movement that a human does to keep, my shirt looks funny, to keep moving and to stay alive. So what we looked at a bunch of different biomechanical heuristics, so different rules of thumb that we can use and apply to different parts of the body to solve problems for our clients. So we use this inhalation expansion concept and the idea of what coupled motion. So when we inhale, do we get thoracic extension? Do we get external rotation? Do we get thoracic posterior expansion? What it is, what coupled motion comes of that, and then how we can use that to improve the performance of both our corrective exercises and how we can improve the performance of our performance-based exercises. And this is kind of like a little bit of a mind-blowing situation for some people, because we kind of flip the idea on its head that you don't always have to exhale on exertion. Sometimes inhaling as you pull the bar towards you in a bent over row can be a better option for helping someone feel more stable throughout the exercise, depending on the training phase that they're in. So what you can do with this right now, if you're listening, or watching is probably easier for this one, but if you doing corrective exercises with a client, have a look and try and figure out what that exercise would look like if you expressed it all the way through to its logical conclusion. So for example, expansion-based exercises, like if we're doing a military press, for example, is an inhalation-based movements like that. That would be a military press. If we go all the way back to that, expand that exercise, that's what it looks like. So tons of different exercises like extension rotation drill will expand into that type of movement, so they can be facilitated to move better with inhalation. Whereas if you look like an exercise like a bench press, is a really simple example here. If I push and I just keep on going, I'll eventually end up in the fetal position. They can be facilitated with compression or an exhalation type phase. So looking at all different exercises you do and trying to fit where breathing should really fit into it, more from a physiological and coupled motion perspective, can really enhance the speed at which you can take people from corrective exercises and move them from that into the idea of exercising correctly, which is a really important thing to do. We also touched on program design. So program design, how we looked at it in this one is how we design a program over the course of a mesocycle for a client. So we broke down 3 concepts: microcycle, mesocycle, training day, and then we also threw in macrocycle. So mesocycle is like a 3 to 6 week program, so a full training program. A microcycle is a training week. A training day is self-explanatory, and a macrocycle is generally a training year. So we kind of discussed that the idea of designing a macrocycle for a general population is a crappy idea, and what's a system that we can use to design exercise programs faster. So what we did is we actually did a program where we mapped out the microcycle first. So we looked at how frequently someone could train, what the optimal frequency is for each muscle group, how we can split that up, and how we can distribute the volume over the muscle groups that need it the most based on the client's goals. And then we applied a progression model to that to then map out the mesocycle, so the next 4 to 6 weeks of training, including deloads. We also discussed whether we have a reactive or a planned deload philosophy, which can depend on the client. And then what we did from there is we designed the training days individually by just pasting in exercises that fitted that type of structure. So this format of designing a program, rather than thinking about what exercises you're going to do, think about what movements, what muscles you're going to do, and how you're going to distribute that over the course of a week. Once you've then done that, then pick a progression model. So if you want to do a single progression model, a triple or a double or a triple progression model, these are easy to find online. I think JPS Health and Fitness has done a really good article on double and triple progression models. but you get and revive stronger from memory. But if you get that all together, what happens there is then it's really easy to design the individual training days. So all you have to do is put in the exercises that will fit that model, and then from adjusting that, all you have to do is make sure the rep range suits the exercise. And this is a huge thing in programming. We know now that hypertrophy is kind of not really dependent on a specific hypertrophy range, but anywhere between 5 to 30 reps will get pretty even hypertrophy outcomes as long as you're close to failure. So what we can do with that is we can actually use the exercises in the repetition range that they're best suited for performance of the exercise, safety, and then also generating a pump. So a pump does contribute somewhat to muscle growth. So for an example of that would be the dumbbell lateral raise. Fantastic exercise for giving hypertrophy to the lateral deltoids, but it's not something that you do for 1 to 5 reps because the risk to reward ratio just isn't there. That's an exercise where anywhere 10 to 20 reps seems to be the sweet spot for most people. So you would program the deltoid exercise using that kind of rep range. If you're going to do a deltoid exercise in a lower rep range, you wouldn't do that. You'd probably do something like a military press or a heavy dumbbell press. Pick the exercise that's relevant to the rep range to get the stimulus that you're after. Really important thing of program design. And you do that once you've worked out, how you're going to split the volume throughout the week and then how you're going to overload it, then you can pick the right exercise for that particular stimuli. And finally, with assessment, one of the last things we kind of went over is how each assessment that we do actually feeds into the other assessments and how it picks up stuff that we'll see reflected in bigger bang exercises. So one example of that was the prone hip extension test, which I've talked about a lot before. How that one will really reflect what we see people doing in kettlebell swings and deadlifts. If someone has a pattern where they're a little bit dominant in their back, in that movement pattern, we'll see that reflected in the performance of the swing. They'll be extending their back rather than their hips in the movement. So there was a ton of takeaways. That's 3 of them that just only one student had. We got a ton of different more, including ways how to individualize exercise selection based on individual biomechanics, a ton of stuff. Really looking forward to doing a few more of these seminars. So what we're going to be doing over this week is going through some of the takeaways that everyone's had, and I'm going to dive into them into a lot more detail. So seminar attendees can get a recap of what they did. And for anyone else who wants to come next time, contact me. We'll be going into this and a ton more. Next one is happening in January, probably around the 2nd or 3rd week. So thanks heaps for watching and listening, guys. I appreciate you all. Speak to you soon.